I got that too, boy. Check, 1, 2. All right, I'm good.
That works too.
Let's piece these broken pieces together.
All right, this is episode 6 of PHumblepodcast. I have with me today a real old friend, but also family. The reason I have him on is he has a new YouTube channel called Expansionetwork. He's also on Instagram under the same title. I'm very excited to talk about his videos that he's posted recently and get into some of the topics that he's discussed specifically. If you didn't know him, now you know him. His name is Hesam Malekan. Welcome to Phumblepodcast, man.
Thanks so much, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. And first of all, before you get started on your questions, I wanted to also congratulate you on what you're doing. I know we were talking about it before this whole thing, that it takes a lot of work to start something from scratch.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of effort. And so I'm in your boat, you're in my boat, and
We're both freshly off the boat.
exactly.
No, thank you, man. No, you understand. There's a lot of similarities between what you're doing and what I'm doing in the podcast world, in the YouTube world. So a lot of editing, a lot of learning. It's fun though, honestly, because I mean, like you, and you can agree. When you have the vision first, you have the idea, and that's what matters most. Is ultimately like all the mistakes with editing and all the growing that we go through. That like the content for me is number one. So, and I think it's the same for you. And your videos are awesome because you really actually like talk about some real shit. So
Thank you.
So what made you want to start with that anyway, Expansionetwork?
So the idea came a few years ago. I don't remember exactly how it came about, but I never had the heart to get it going. I didn't know where to start or what to do, and the idea came like an inspiration. I think it was during a run or some sort, and even the name. It started with the name Expansionetwork, and but I never moved on it. I just let it die and just went on with my life.
Wow.
But I had to think about how that all came about. And the other day I was thinking about that, and what I realized was it really came out of all the struggles that I've been through. From age 0 to age 19, I would say. When I think back, I was kind of in a state of sleeping. Like I feel like I was sleeping from age 0 to age 19. I was just going along whatever I was a part of. I didn't have my own say in anything because I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to do and what life is about. And I didn't care to know, to be honest. I was okay with whatever. And from age 19 to age 22, 23, I went through a lot of struggles and challenges in almost every area of life. Like any area of life you can talk about, it hit me hard. And so I think that's what really motivated to start this. Because what happened after these challenges, I chose to let these kind of teach me and inspire me to grow and learn and research and put into practice. So I think what I learned, I feel like a lot of people are probably going through it or may have gone through it. I'm not saying I've arrived anywhere, but I'm saying that I've got a pretty good footing of what I want to do. But it all came out of those struggles.
Yeah, that's good. So what those struggles... I do agree that a lot of people go through that. I went through it too, my own way, and I've known you through all those years. You said so. I've known you since you were 11. And to get reference, you're now 30, and you want to let the audience know what your career ended up being as far as on the side of Expansionetwork.
Yeah. So and again, that was a result of struggles too. But right now, what I'm doing is I work as a nurse. We had a funny word we call us man nurse, nurse.
Nurse.
Yeah, because there's not many male nurses in the whole profession.
Yeah.
So, but I'm a nurse. I'm an RN. I work in workers' comp, which means people who get injured at their jobs. I did a master's program. I started working, and now I'm 2.5 years into what I do. I basically help people get back to work in the safest and most efficient way possible. And I love what I do.
Yeah.
I don't mind doing it till I retire. But at the same time, I realize that I have a lot more to offer to life. That's why I'm doing this other side of things.
The Expansion Network. Yeah. And we're going to dive into the Expansion Network, but I'm sure with COVID and everything, your nursing career, probably you've seen a lot from just COVID alone. And it took us so long to be able to get each other in person, right? And people who follow Podcast, most of my guests are actually virtual, just to be safe, right? But we're family, so I've known you, and that's why I wanted you here in person, especially because I wanted to talk to you in person about these topics that we're going to get into. And you and I have had many discussions in the past. I mean, podcasting and YouTubing aside, like just you and I sitting down and we discussed, like, I know one movie we both really liked is Doctor Strange. And because of how many like messages are in that and how it's like, it's a hero movie, obviously, but there's way more to it. And you and I discussed it. We called it Information High because we got super into it. Man, so that was so when I'm watching your Expansion network videos, I get the same vibe. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is something I want him to be on for. I wanted you on anyway, but then this was like the extra motivation to have you on sooner. So you came up with the name Expansion Network before you. So how you said you came up with it? Can you give a timeline, like when you came up with that?
I just, my best estimate was 2-3 years ago.
Okay.
This was, so remember I told you there was 2-3 years worth of challenges, and I'm open to talk about the challenges if you want to.
Yeah.
But after those 2-3 years, I went into research mode / application. I became kind of a scientist in my own life. I would try research something, try it out, see how it worked, collect the results, and repeat it if it worked or discard it. So during that period where I started doing that and I just seen the result pile and compound, I would just go on runs. I would just feel so motivated, inspired. And I feel like it's one of those times that it just kind of came out because I knew I wanted to teach. I didn't know how I wanted to teach. It's not necessarily I have a lot to say, or it's not that my ideas are original. I don't have a single original idea. But I think my talent or my gift is giving ideas that everybody already knows, but in a way you can digest it, in a way you can actually apply it. Because we're not in today where information is no longer the problem. We're bombarded with information. How can we take information that we already know and then translate it into action? That's the problem, and we need people who can assist with that.
And that's what you're doing. So maybe mention one of the struggles you had that led you on this journey.
So I think the first struggle I had, so before we kind of talk about that, my channel is basically based on 5 foundations to life. This is what I've learned. And these are all based on the struggles I had. Now, some people expand this to 7, some people do 12, but I've condensed it to 5. And essentially what I've learned is if you want to have a smooth life, there's 5 areas you have to constantly work on every day or master, for a better term. One is relationships. That's both personal and social. The other one is finances. The other one is health, both physical and mental. 4th is your spirituality. And 5th is your vocation, or what you do for a living that earns you an income. So these 5 areas, I've learned that if any of them is missing in any shape or form, it will affect you. And the best way I've heard it put is, I don't know if you mentioned one of those old carriage wheels, like back in the day, there's horses and there was carriage. And then, so you had those wheels and you had the center spoke and you had spokes coming out. So you had the wheel and then you got what's holding it in the middle and then you got, so these 5 areas of life are each spoke, basically. So if any of the spokes is shorter than the others, your ride is going to be bumpy. That's the best way I've heard it put. But when I moved into the research state of my life, I was essentially problem solving one of these 5 areas, but I didn't know it back then. I was just problem solving any problems that would come to me. But the first challenge that it started was relationships, both personal and social. Growing up, I didn't have any much associations. I was an introvert for most of my life. I didn't know how to hold conversations, but especially with the opposite sex. Like I had no idea even how to hold an eye contact, how to have a conversation. And I was just getting older and older and getting really frustrated because I thought, well, one day I want to find a partner in my life. And when that day comes, I want to make sure that I don't settle for somebody. I want to have the opportunity to also be actively participating in the process of choosing. Because if you don't feel confident with yourself, you just settle with what you get. But if you feel that confidence, you can pursue and understand what you want and find that. But to do that, you have to be comfortable. And I didn't have that comfort because I didn't have any, sisters or whatnot. So I went through my first relationship, and that pretty much crushed me. Nothing wrong with her. She's a great person. It was all me. It was all my fault because I wasn't experienced enough. I wasn't knowledgeable enough. And so that started the process. And the interesting thing was, I don't know what clicked in me, but usually there's two types of mindsets people have in their life. One is victim mentality, one's a creator mentality, right? Victim mentality is everything's happening to me, meaning that if I don't get good grades, my teachers or my books suck. If I'm not doing well, my job or my boss sucks. If my health is not good enough, my gene sucks. So I had victim mentality on blast, and I didn't know what that was back then. But everything was somebody else's fault. And so, of course, at that point, that relationship was also that person's fault. So, but I came across certain information or inspiration that made me turn inward and said, well, what did I do to attract this experience into my life? Why was it there? What was it doing for me? And so what that led to was certain level of information that basically there were certain people that taught you how to be more confident in interactions, both personal and social. And I followed that, and for a while I turned into scientist mode, like we talked about before. And what I really realized was you could master that area of life. Because it took a while, it took a year, but what was a place of absolute lack in my life became a place of abundance, about a year and a half. And what allowed that to happen was I was willing to try anything and everything. I was willing to sacrifice anything of who I thought I was and to accomplish that goal. So after that year, I accomplished that, and I was like, well, if I can do this, what else can I do? And so I started to turn my attention onto all the other things that was really lacking in my life. And the next time was what I wanted to do with my life, my profession, my schooling, my grades. I remember that was the second hard hit that I had. I was going to UC Davis. You went to Davis, right?
That's right.
So I was going.
I remember when you were there. We were both there.
That's right. That's right. So I was going to Davis, and I remember at that time, I probably had the lowest GPA of anybody you'll ever meet. I don't know if anybody knows this. Very close people to me know, but I had a 1.8 GPA. I don't think anybody can have a lower. You have to try to get that low GPA. Right. And so Davis pretty much put me on academic probation. I was pre-med back then. I had put $1,000 of loans. I had no direction. I didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to do what everybody else wanted to do, just be distracted. And so I had put $1,000 of loan. UC Davis put me on academic probation, means you're pretty much gone, right? And my parents were like, you're not coming home. You need to get yourself straight. You can't come back. And so I started just taking jobs. And I remember the job I got was selling vacuums going door to door. And I remember one day we were going door to door, and
you were like 20 here at this point, 21?
Right around that time, And I remember going door to door and trying to sell these vacuums. And the way we would do it was we would go knock at the door and we would offer free shampoo cleaning for your carpet. We would say, one of your rooms in your house, we're going to come back and shampoo it and clean it. But what we're actually doing is trying to get into the house and selling the vacuum itself. We would still do the shampoo, but then do that. But it was one of the worst jobs I ever had in my life because nobody likes that. Nobody wants to, come and knock, and people would cuss at you, they slam the door at you. I remember one of those days, I was walking in the rain and it was cold and I got sick that day and I didn't make a single penny. I worked for three weeks and this is right around the same time that I was on academic probation. And about 6 months before, a year before, that whole relationship thing had happened to me. And I remember on the ride home, because we'll always get around in vans, there was a bunch of people, all jobless, all really striving to just find something to eat, And I remember looking around and saying, is this what I am? Just looking at the people around me, is this all I have to offer to life? And I think something just flipped again, clicked. It said, well, if I was able to master that and get ahead of that, what can I do with my education?
Yeah.
And so
that was our cat.
I think they're getting really excited.
They love your comment.
So what ended up happening was I turned my focus and problem solving, mentality to that aspect.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is I did everything you're supposed to do. I didn't care what I had to sacrifice. What do I have to do? Which people I have to hang out with, which people I have to let go, which activities I have to let go, which activities I have to gain. I was willing to do whatever it took.
Right.
So I surrounded myself with certain people at that stage that were just getting A's in everything. And I just started emulating them. And I would sit right in the front of the class. I would take notes. I would study all day long. So anyhow, within 1 year, I went from 1.8 to 3.8.
Yeah.
Got my philosophy bachelor's, then got into the master's program, then became class president, then won the Sutter Student Award, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But at that point, it was just on automatic run. It's because my confidence in myself had increased so much.
Yeah.
I don't think it was anything special. I just figured out what to do.
Yeah.
And one of the keys to success is make unlimited sacrifices.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Because you're your own
worst enemy.
Worst enemy, exactly.
Or your biggest ally.
Or biggest ally.
That's true. Yeah. It's no, I remember those times, man. And it's like, my perspective on all of that, like, because, you and I grew up, we were very close when we were younger, and we hung out a lot, both of us figuring out what we wanted to do. I'm a few years your senior, but, we basically kind of both moved here around the same time in California.
Yeah.
I moved here from the East Coast. You moved here from Iran, another country, so that was even tougher. And then you went through your struggles in your teenage years, and I was just out of high school, and I was kind of aimless too. And I think we didn't really talk about our struggles. I know, as far as relationships, we were kind of involved. We knew what was going on in the other person's life.
Yeah.
And I remember that relationship you talking about, and you woke me up for it. You called me up for it.
Yeah. I remember you were the only person I had. So
Yeah, man.
For
better or for worse, but anyway, it was, I think we both learned a lot and from each other, and then also separate. I think when we focused on ourselves a bit, we took some time to kind of figure ourselves out. And then I went my own route, and I discovered my love for music, and that should be where I should head, and that's what I studied. And then in Davis, we kind of saw each other again a little bit, and that's when you were at the peak of your struggles.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I remember those times, and then I remember the following, the next few years that were to come. I think that was when we really took time apart to figure stuff out, and it wasn't even anything bad. I just knew you needed to figure it out, and I did too. And then, but during those times, it seems, is when you figured all these things out, which is cool and this is the first time I'm actually hearing this, and then it's like we're filling the gaps that was in there, and it's kind of great to see that you came out of that. But I think the key to all of this is that you allowed yourself to struggle, and you allowed yourself to fail, right? And you started embracing it as opposed to avoiding it, right? I think that's what I'm getting from what you're telling me, is that what clicked for you is that, no, this should happen to a lot of people, I think, right? So I think it was a little humbling maybe, and then you started to realize you're not alone, and maybe that then led you to discoveries of these 5 phases.
Yeah, exactly. Because everybody goes. I'm not unique in that. Everybody goes through their wake up moments or challenges.
Yeah.
But that's at a very critical point where you say to yourself, basically, how you move to define those challenges is you say what meaning you extract from it. The same thing can happen to 4 different people, and they'll completely take different meanings from it. One person will go into the victim mentality, say, see why my life sucks, see why this is the reasons why it's happening to me. The other one will say, I'm getting stronger, I'm more strong than I've ever been, whatever, or all the way in between. Yeah. So I wasn't like that all the way to the end, because I started victim mentality. Yeah. But every time I moved this way, I saw the results that it would bring, and I kind of became high off of that. Yeah. Because I realized how much you can manipulate life. if you understand that you're creating all of it.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand you're creating all of it, you are susceptible to all of it.
Wow.
It will create you,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one move later on to Expansion Network.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, this is no secret that, I mean, it is for the audience, but you lost your grandfather, I think around that same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that, I was there, right? So for people to have reference, how we're related is that your uncle is married to my sister.
Mm-hmm.
So his dad, your grandfather, and you know, when he passed, was it like 10 years ago or so? Maybe
Yeah.
a little bit more. Yeah. And I think that was the first time when you went up to speak at the memorial. I remember how emotional you were, and that was the first time I felt you, man. I felt you on a deeper level. You know what I mean?
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a moment where I thought, okay, I noticed, maybe, I guess I noticed something in you that was different from before. Like I noticed like he's gone through some things that I don't know about. Right, and that was the time where we were starting to phase out, like we were going on our own lanes.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, we'd still talk at gatherings, but it was
it's more on the surface.
Yeah. So, but then I feel like that was like, I feel like you went to another level as far as growth. I feel like you, because you're very, you said it yourself, you're introverted, right? And most of our friendship, I was the one that talked all the time.
That's right.
And so like, but that's even changed now. Like you're a lot more talkative now and more social. That was one of the things you said you worked on. It looks like so.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be introverted. I'm just saying like that was your own calling, your own choice.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, from that time in our lives, and when I saw that, I when you were telling me your struggles and your like wake up calls, like I feel like it was around that time.
Yeah.
And I feel like that probably contributed too, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we all want to make our parents and grandparents proud. So I'm sure when that time, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you like feel like, damn, like I wish he was around maybe longer so he could see me succeed?
A little bit. Honestly, I learned who he was after he died.
Yeah.
And my biggest thing was I wish I knew who he was while he was alive, because I would have been differently with him. I would spend time a lot more differently with him. He was one of the most purest souls and I know all of these through stories.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody in my family ever says a negative story about him. And that says a lot about him.
Yeah.
So I wish I knew him like that.
Yeah, and he was in Iran most of your semi-adult life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you were a kid when you left, so
yeah. I mean, when he would come later on, he had Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, so he was struggling.
He was a shell of himself by then. Like, he wasn't really.
He was kind of like 1 foot here, 1 foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of passing, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, one of your videos, and that garnered the most attention because we just recently, my wife and I lost my father-in-law recently, and so that struggle in my mid-30s now, right? That was one that was really allowed me to really gravitate towards that last video, Life After Death, right? And let's segue into that because I want to know what your take is on life after death and looking back retrospectively to your grandfather passing. Everybody passes, right?
Yeah.
So like it's harder obviously when it's someone you know or someone you love. So how has your perspective been formed or changed even since 10 years ago till now regarding life and death?
Well, another big experience was, my wife's dad passing away. And I know him for a very short period of time, but he was also a very special soul.
Mm-hmm.
He welcomed me into the family like open arms.
Mm-hmm.
Once he got to know me, he welcomed me with open arms. And it was really different and special, especially in his environment. And I also had the, I don't know what the term for it, but the pleasure to be part of his transitioning to what comes after.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I was, because Misha at that time, she was going to school and she couldn't be at the bed all the time. And so I told her, you know what, you go do your program because you're going to flunk out if you're here every day. I'm going to be here. And I still had to study for my nursing board exam, but I was emotionally more collected, so I could handle it. Mm-hmm. So I spent nights there, almost a week sometimes, at times, just, sleeping next to him and watching him slowly transition.
Yeah.
So that was a huge thing, and but it also has to do with my spiritual training, but also some of my own experiences that I've had. That's probably could be a subject of another podcast, but I've had certain mystical experiences that also has tremendously shaped me, and we could probably talk 5 hours just for that. So I don't want to get too far into that, but
you can touch on it a bit.
okay.
Yeah.
So, but essentially, everybody will try to give you something about what comes after, right? And just to quickly summarize the content of my video, I'm not going to get to it, but there's essentially 3 lines of thought. When you die, nothing happens because there's nothing to happen. This is basically the end of you, end of humanity. 2 is there's a whole lot of something, and 3 is you get reincarnated.
Yeah.
People who believe in reincarnation usually are under 2 forms. So they either say that you come back as a new person, so that depends on the life you live now, or you come back under an absolutely new form. So you can come back under a tree or under another animal or even as a rock. Yeah. So the idea of reincarnation logically never made any sense because you're taking a lot of something and it basically, a lot of it gets deleted right after death and it kind of resets. And reality just doesn't do that. Anywhere you look, it just never does that. You can't take your memories, your perfections, your virtues, your qualities, all these things you gain, and just delete it, and all that comes back is your karma, as they call it. The karma part makes a lot of sense, but what you've gained out of this life, that can just evaporate. You're gaining it for something. Everything has a use. Every cause has an effect.
I agree with that because I think it's when you do go through your moments of learning, I think it's invaluable, and there's something about it that makes you feel like you've just gained so much, right? You can't even put your finger on it half the time, but it's something it's a feeling. It's like a confirmation, call it, right? But it's something that's bigger than what's around us. I feel like it's bigger than just me or you or
Exactly.
It's like, so I believe that. I would agree with you that I can't just grab that and say it's nothing,
right?
Because it's more than just a physical thing,
right? Yeah. And then the other aspect is the people that these are more of a materialist point of view of the universe, where it says that if you pass away, well, nothing survives, because your body dissipates and your consciousness, your mind is related to your body, so that also dissipates. Yeah. But that again is fallible in my opinion, because that's actually violating science itself. Because science says for every cause there must be effect.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of causes for your body, but there is a lot that you gather that's not really physical. For example, your personality. Locate me where your personality is in your body. You cannot. Right? Your attributes, your kindness. Locate me. Which part of your brain is related to your kindness? Yeah. You can't. Yeah. So these things, these are attributes that a higher part of yourself is collecting as gems under the the vehicle of the body. So these again can't become nothing. So what happens is you're producing a lot of causes in your life, and then you're essentially saying that right at the end of life, all these causes produce absolutely no effects. Yeah. So again, that just can't happen because even science doesn't support that. Yeah. Science says for every cause there must be some sort of effect. Yeah. Especially with a living being who can discover the hidden realities of all things. The human being discovers all the secrets of science, all the secrets of atom. There's nothing it can't discover. So it even discovers things that are almost beyond physical plane. As we're learning into quantum world and string theory and all those things, these are not really physical states. And we're crossing into it in physics. So that can be either. And then the other side is more of the religious side. It says there's a whole lot of something. But my problem with that always was, well, where is the proof? Show me something. Give me something. It's a lot of stuff that says in a lot of books. And I'm not trying to disrespect books. I believe in books. But I'm saying that I needed more than that. So there's multiple different views of the intaking approach. And one view is an aspect that I didn't take in my videos, but having direct access to other worlds besides this one. You can do that in prayer. You can do that in meditation. You can do that with certain plant medicines. There's many ways you can do it. You can do it in dreams, I feel. You can do it in dreams, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I feel like that's where I connect a lot. It's through dreams. I don't have many. Well, I mean, they say you're always dreaming. It's just whether you remember or not. But
the ones that I remember are just so profound. That's one of those things that's part of your experience.
Yeah, for example, how can you have a dream that can come true in the future? A lot of people have had that experiences. I've had a dream, and literally 5 out of 10 people will say, I've had a dream that has come true in the future.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Is that what a deja vu is?
That's a little, maybe. Deja vu is a lot of times in, like, you come across the same instance in a waking moment, right?
Right.
So that's not necessarily related to a dream.
Okay.
But you can come across a moment and you're like, I felt this before.
Yeah.
I've known this before, right?
Yeah. I've had that many times.
Yeah, and so, but dream is a little really concrete because a lot of people say, well, I've seen that and it comes true.
Right.
So anyhow, the video goes on to say that, well, maybe you don't have to worry so much about stuff you don't understand or stuff you don't know.
Right.
Maybe we can look at stuff we already know and then look at that and see how reality repeats after itself. So when you come into this world, you go into the world of the womb for 9 months.
Yeah.
And I like to call it that, the world of the womb.
Yeah.
Because it really is a state of reality for you for 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're in there, you have a distorted time frame.
Yeah.
You don't know it's 9 months. For you, it's all eternity.
Yeah, it could. Yeah.
Right? Or it could be very fast.
Right.
It could be either or.
Right.
But you have no sense of time when you're in there.
That's true.
Which again tells you what our sense of time is, how much diluted it is when we're waking. It only makes sense to you when you're here. But when you're sleeping, it all gets distorted again.
Now, what do you think of that, though? Because we've all come from a womb, right? Like every single person here in this world. But I haven't seen anyone that can remember any of it, obviously.
Uh-huh.
I can't tell you what happened because it almost could have not even been me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if we're taking this approach that you're saying about life after death from this life, right? And whatever experiences we had in that womb, right? That 9 months could have been 80 years. It could feel like 80 years, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe this is 9 months for us right now. You know what I mean? This is stuff I don't know. But like, we define years. I mean, humans made all of this, right? This time.
The way we perceive it.
This unit of time, right?
Yeah.
So like what we call 80 years is just how we could understand days. And
a lot of people who have near-death experiences, they say that right when you cross over, this life feels like moments.
Right.
Like it's almost like a dream.
Yeah.
When you have a dream, when you're in the dream, it could be hours, days, even years.
Right.
But when you wake up from a dream, it was maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So, so the time is really distorted depending on where you're at, from what point of view you're looking at it.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like do you think we went through something like this when we came to this world from the womb, the world of the womb?
So it'd be a little bit more clear.
Meaning like the minute when we're about to be born, right? Like, did that whole 9 months feel like a moment? I guess it's.
I don't think
fantasizing.
I understand what you're saying, but so consciousness is a really weird thing, and in that 9 months, consciousness is kind of finding itself. I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It really is not aware of its transition the way we are.
Yeah.
It feels certain things. It feels light and sound and stuff like that. But that's as far as it gets. It has no idea what's happening. But even in the world of the womb, it goes from a place of just sleeping all the time, or absolute just not much of what's in the womb. But then it starts to obtain a little bit of light coming through, or a little bit of sound or whatnot. So that's where consciousness starts. Yeah. And so, but at the point of transition, it actually consciousness feels pain at the moment of transition,
right?
Because it doesn't understand what is happening. But what is also happening is your information received is intensifying infinitely, because the womb protects you of what can reach to you. Mm-hmm. But the minute you come out, now the world can reach you. Yeah. So you perceive that as pain because you're not comfortable with it. Yeah. So if we look at that and we follow that pattern forward, essentially you can probably see the same thing. Absolute bliss and joy is coming to you, but you will perceive it as pain because so much more is coming than what you understand. So it makes a lot of sense if you look at it critically and then understand reality. It repeats itself a lot of time. And the other point is that you're in the womb, you're developing eyes and hands and feet and thought, but none of these things you use in the womb. You're developing all of it for this life. And now it doesn't mean you're going to be maybe have a lesser form of life. For some people it may be, but your quality of life heavily gets affected. But this is a physical world, so you develop a lot of physical attributes.
Yeah, and maybe these two lives are incomparable. Like you can't compare maybe the life of the womb to this life, or at least to the cognitive levels that I would understand it. I don't think I could like. I mean, there's no one that could say. Now, as far as this life going to the next, if whatever that is that we're talking about, is there's documentaries about people who crossed it and then been returned. Yeah, like there's shows on Netflix talking about that.
Near death experience.
Yeah, near death experiences, and they've literally, like you said, they describe it as like it's like time is not relevant. Like time doesn't make sense, and that is crazy to me. Like, for me, it makes me think like, what am I worried about in this one? You know what I mean? Like, as far as like, we try to hang on, right? It's like one of the best lines I've heard in the movie is from the Joker in The Dark Knight, when he's talking to Two-Face and he goes, people want order, right? People want order, and everybody. If I say that a prisoner got killed, no one panics, right? But he's like, as soon as I say I'm going to blow up a hospital, they lose their mind because that breaks the chaos. It creates chaos. And he said he's the agent of chaos. But there was so much profoundness to that movie because I feel like it was more than just a superhero movie. It was like life. It was like taking you and simplifying life for me. It was like, yeah, dude, like we all obsess about what we can control. But the reality is I feel that it's like you should welcome challenges, welcome changes like you went through, I went through, right? It's those changes, like you said, is preparing you for a stronger version of yourself or even that next one.
And that's a choice you make, actually. I feel, even with this life, it's a choice to make that these challenges are going to ready me for what comes after. It's a choice you actively make. Because if you don't make that choice, they will burden you on a greater level. Because now you have more challenges to point to and say why I am doing the way I am, or I'm not where I want to be.
But that choice takes effort, right? The choice to welcome it, the choice to be open to the changes and embrace it. That takes like a solid effort mentally, right?
And a lot of courage.
But so my question is, where did that lack of courage and where does that almost laziness come from in human nature? That we all, at our base, if we weren't thinking, we could just pass up on these things. We could make the wrong choice. Due to those two factors.
I feel like there's probably two areas. One is just the way we're made. Obviously, man or a human being is made out of three different parts. You're part mineral, you're part vegetable, you're part animal, and you're part divine. So that's four, actually.
4 parts.
Four. And you're composed of all these things. And the vegetable and animal kingdom has its own attributes. You are made out of that, and you need to take care of that. So you need to eat, you need to procreate, you need to get your sleep and stuff like that. And the body just wants to take care of itself because it wants to ensure its own survival and produce offsprings, etc. So that's the biological aspect to it. But I think that today there's a heavy psychological aspect to it, which is the way that we're instructed to seek immediate gratification. Here's what I've learned. All success is literally at the end of all immediate gratification. Everything that's lasting will take time. You have to be patient for it, and you have to work like you've never worked before, and you have to sacrifice a lot of that which is lower in you in order to create more of that which is higher. And we're taught literally all the opposites. We're taught to seek immediate gratification when it comes to food, when it comes to how you move, when it comes to how you associate with people, even the content you consume, which is a greater and greater level of what actually enters your world. Is not necessarily what you see or who you talk to, it's the content you consume. And so that immediate gratification, any entrepreneur, anybody who's pursuing success will tell you, learn to go away from that in any area of life. And this holds true in all 5 aspects. I mean, the person who wants to bodybuild, they have to sacrifice in and outs. They have to sacrifice carbs. They have to sacrifice simple carbs, whatever. The person who wants to develop a good, solid relationships, they have to sacrifice that animal nature that wants to mate with many people and hone it into one. The person who wants to become let's say, financially healthy, they have to learn not to buy useless stuff. So it's always fighting against immediate gratification. And that may not be taught to you when you're growing up.
Yeah.
Right? Some people have spiritual values that teach that. Some people have parents that teach that. Some people teach the opposite.
Yeah.
I've been part of families that literally teach you to pursue immediate gratification, and their justification is you only live once.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That is a reality, and I respect it. I have no problem with it. But with that reality comes certain fruits. When you eat your fruits, don't keep blaming the world. You are the one that planted those seeds, right? So you can't go with the mentality we only live once and I do my immediate gratifications, but I don't like my fruits. You have to accept the fruits that it comes with.
And you know what's hard about that is some of these human mentalities that are taken, and all, respect to all, right? We're not judging anybody, but we're just saying these are realities that happen.
Yeah.
What with some of those choices though, I feel the ones that, whether I agree with or not, some of those have direct effect. Actually, all of them have direct effect on their offspring. You know what I mean? You just said it, like they train, right? But even some of the choices they made that could have damaged themselves or made them kind of like get held back as far as evolving and becoming like where humanity is going to go eventually. It slowed it down maybe for them. That could be a direct effect to their child. So now their child is paying for something that they did. You know what I mean? So you don't only live once, I guess, because now your child can feel it, or their child can feel it. That, like generationally, we can make choices that generationally can affect.
Yeah, and some people put it as, you are a collection of your ancestors' sins. And it doesn't necessarily just mean wrongdoings. You are a collection of psychological habits that have been passed down to you. And you have no idea they're in you.
Right.
And a lot of life is actually not learning, it's unlearning things that are no longer serving you. So that's literally what I went through from age probably 19 to 27, 28. Is unlearning everything.
I'm still learning. I'm still unlearning.
And so, but it was so intense for me. And it was actually really exciting because as I was throwing out, I also watched my reality change. Because everything that's deeply rooted in me must find manifestation of itself in my external environment. So if there's a habit that is just rooted, and it doesn't matter if I'm aware of it or not, it just matters that it's rooted. And it works just like these plants out there work. Certain plants produce certain fruits, certain plants produce other fruits. And part of the reason...
And some plants produce poison.
Poison, exactly. And the interesting thing is stuff like weeds and poisonous plants, you don't have to garden for them. They naturally grow. But the good stuff, you have to actively grow.
There you go, That's what you were talking about with the mind. Because to get what we want, where we want to be, we have to work harder.
Exactly.
We gotta think more, we gotta plan more, and
you have to become a lot more active in your life. You can't be passive anymore. Because the world wants you to become passive. It wants you to turn you into a consumer because it can use you, abuse you, and sell to you. But you have to become active and take ownership and understand that you are made out of many parts, a lot of different parts. This is what I've learned. I'm not preaching this to others. I'm just saying this is what I've learned. You're made out of many parts, and all these parts are being designed by somebody else. When you're passive, you have very little to do with what's going on. And the world loves to program you because then they can turn you into a consumer. They can turn you to get your vote a certain way. They can get you to manipulate to use certain items a certain way. But the minute you become active, the first thing you realize is how much you're bombarded with other people's belief systems. Because your belief systems sell.
You're not thinking for yourself. You're letting others think for you.
You're letting others think for you, and you're letting others install habits in you. And that's the greatest thing, because habits control your life.
So is this where followers and leaders are made? Where it's like, there's a lot of, especially these days, like people can become leaders even when they don't want to become leaders because they're just doing something they like with zero intention of leading, right? But this is where I think we're responsible for what we put out in the ether, what we say, right? This is the point of this whole this show in general for me is I just felt that I needed to be like, I would see what's going on in this country or in the world, right? How polarized everything is and all that, right? Not just with politics, everything, right? There's so many factors that I feel like we're divided, and I felt like it doesn't like I love all of those people. I don't care what they like, what TV channel they like, what news channel they watch. I don't care about that. I don't care even what party they belong to, right? Because for me, it's simple, and maybe I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but for me, it's like what I just always think. Well, if we're humans first, right? Let's just keep it there because everything else was taught, right? But the human, the soul, as you say, whatever that means to most people, it means different things.
Your energy, whatever you call it.
Yeah, your energy. Like this conversation, and I've had this types of conversations with all types of people, right? And I've had like super informative and fun, whether it's laughter or even sadness or suspense, whatever the emotion that attached to it is. The result was that I felt better. I felt like relieved. In a way, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, why can't we just go back? Why can't we do that, right? And not get distracted by what others are saying. But what I was leading to is what's your experience when it came to mental health, like the challenges of overcoming, like I don't know if you went through this, like for me, for example, like I've had many days where I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do anything because I'm just so defeated up here, right? Because I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, as they say, right? But like the day before that wasn't even necessarily a bad day, right? It was like I had a great day. I mean, I had concerts. You know how much I love music. You remember when I toured? I've had tours. I've had like amazing concerts where I'm like cheered and like people are chanting my band's name and everything. And anybody who was watching that is like, oh, this guy must be on top of the world. That same night, I drove home from that gig and I'm crying because I'm like not happy, So that was like one struggle I had when I was touring. Is like, why? Like when I discovered music as what I wanted to do, it was such an amazing feeling. But I was also naive about the real world. I was so young and I was like innocent, I guess, right? I wasn't broken in, I wasn't shown the reality. I was kind of nurtured from family. Family's always like, oh, go do it, do this, you believe it. And then you start getting hit by like people you don't know. And then here comes the internet. And then now you can see anything. I mean, I for celebrities who like kind of stay out of the limelight when they're not doing a movie or when they're not producing an album. Like I have respect for that because they don't let Hollywood eat them up. They don't let the Hollywood way of living rule their lives. And there's a lot of those people I know. Like Johnny Depp, I feel like is one, right? Or like, and he even goes through his own struggles. But like Sean Penn, like these actors that I feel like they kind of do similar things that you're saying. Like they dictate their life within the business that they're in, right? Like the habits of the business say like do A, B, and C, but they're like, no, I'm going to do D, E, and F because I want to do that, right? So that level of clarity of thinking, how did you get to that? How were you able to, or maybe you're still figuring it out to a degree, but how are you able to have that clarity? Because that's, I think, the word. It's clarity enough to see it, right?
So I'm still, like you said, figuring it out. But I started focusing on, because especially as a male, I feel, society puts certain standards on males, puts certain other standards for female. As a male, the standard that's put on you is you need to become successful and be happy and joyful. And that was an aim in my life, but I started to look at the end result. Well, what's the point of success? It's joy and fulfillment. And so I started to say, well, we'll work on that, but let me focus on joy and fulfillment. And so the 5 areas in my channel, which all those things are, but the part that has to do with your joy and fulfillment is your spirituality. And I sometimes don't like to use that word because there's so much negative image attached to it, and people have terrorized it by law of dogma, superstition, judgment, all sorts of things. But the way
which are, by the way, not spiritual at all.
Exactly. But the way I define spirituality is actually going back into relationships. Every person in this universe has a relationship. You have a relationship outside to your friends. You have a relationship inside to your partner, let's say your spouse or your best friend, let's say. But your primary relationship is to life itself. Mm. Every person has the primary relationship of whatever you want to call it, the universe, the life. You are first in a relationship with that. Every single day, every single moment, in your dream or awake, you have a direct relationship with that aspect of reality. Mm. If your relationship is that of bad communication, of bad health and misunderstanding, we call that depression. Mm-hmm. If your relationship is that of good communication and of joy and understanding, you can understand, you can talk, you understand the language. We call that elevation and joy. Mm-hmm. So it's when you understand it that way, you take things and success and all this crap immediately out of it. It has nothing to do with success. Mm-hmm. Your joy and fulfillment has to do with your relationship with reality itself. Yeah. That's why you can have somebody who's blissed out on the grass, or somebody who's blissed out working as a registered nurse or as a musician. Mm-hmm. Because you are in a relationship with reality regardless of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Now you can expand that. Mm-hmm. They say money makes you happy. No, it doesn't. Money expands what you are. Money expands whatever you are. Money is energy. You know, before money used to be sheeps. Mm-hmm. At some point in reality, money used to be cotton. Yeah. At some point it used to be sugar. Yeah. It's just an idea that transforms itself as whatever we agree that has monetary value. Yeah. So it's energy. When I add energy to you, I add power to you. If you're miserable, I just give you more to be miserable with. Right. But if you're joyful, I give you more to be joyful with. You will go build stuff. You will give it away. You will use it productively. It's a power you'll use responsibly. Yeah. So go first to joy and fulfillment. And when you go there, understand you're in relationship with reality. Now, how do you foster your relationship with reality? That's not an easy, just one or two thing to say. That's why we're on this earth, to figure that out, how to speak to reality. And I think that actually that story goes way beyond this life and even the worlds to come. I think that's an infinite story. But if you find somebody who's high energy, if you find somebody who's happy most of the time, they know something. They may not know it consciously, but they unconsciously have formed a good relationship with reality, right? Yeah. And again, you don't need to learn, just go emulate them. They may not even know. A lot of people don't know why they're successful at something. You just have to get used to them and watch them closely. Being a good student is like the best thing in life, right? So when I started doing that, it led me to many books. I mean, reading, I used to not read. Yeah. So reading was a huge thing that I started. I probably read 200-300 books in that 23 that I started. So how do you develop that relationship with reality itself? One thing that I can say generally is emulate people who are successful at being really happy at life and really high energy, and not pleasure. We're not talking about pleasure. Pleasure is when you get a cup of coffee or you play video games or you eat McDonald's. That gives you 5 minutes of happiness. Is sustained. It doesn't come and go. It's so sustained and it's rock solid. Even if you lost somebody, it's still there. Yeah. Those type of people have a certain relationship. When you start following those people, whether they know it or not, they follow certain laws. It turns out that it's not just the physics that there's laws. It turns out that it's not just fitness that has laws. It turns out that joy and fulfillment, there's laws that govern that as well. Mm. You have to do a lot of things. That is uncomfortable, that's courageous. You have to sacrifice a lot of things. Mm-hmm. For some people, it is everything they've ever known. Yeah. It has to be, maybe sacrifice all your friends, all your job. People's job make them really unhappy. There's certain foods that make you unhappy. Mm-hmm. You have to be ready to sacrifice those things and learn those laws that govern life. Mm-hmm. You know, that really govern your relationship to life. Mm-hmm. And when you focus on that, and I think it's inseparable. I mean, I believe that these 5 things that I mentioned on my channel, these 5 things, you have to have all of them. But if you could just pick one, pick this one. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I think if you can master this one, you can definitely master all the others. Easy.
Because it's the hardest one.
It's the hardest one. It takes the most amount of sacrifice. Yeah. And the reward that comes is the most delayed. There is no direct correlation. If I take a pill right now, I can feel the effects in a minute. Yeah. Again, instant gratification. I'm trained to look for that. Yeah. But if I want to become happy, I may not see it in a year, 2 years, 3 years for some people, because they may be in a bad relationship. They have to get to a better relationship. Yeah. You may be in a good job, bad job, you need to get to good, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So I would say it's your relationship with reality and learning the laws that govern it. And there's a lot. I think, again, that could be in a whole nother podcast. But there's ways, and not giving up and understanding that you can do it. Anybody can do it. Even if you're depressed, even if you're not depressed, if you're okay, you like to just be more happy, more joyful.
Mm-hmm.
If you look for it hard enough, you'll find it.
No, that's interesting. So, and I think if you have, when you get to that sustained happiness, and I think we all will, that's a definition. That's, I think, directly correlated with finding that relationship with reality, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for me, I'm the most unhappy when I'm in the unknown, right? When I don't know what's happening. Like, I feel depleted. And I think that's when I have the days that I have the hardest time waking up. It's when I don't know what I have to do, or what's my point of today, right? Like, that's when it's the hardest. So, but that's just on a daily, but then it's on your like long-term goals, even like looking at myself in 40 years, like, where am I going to be? You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
The unknowns, I think they can be scary enough or paralyzing enough where you almost are like, well, I'm just going to sit here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it can be like that, but I think the key is to enjoy, for me, is to enjoy every day and to the fullest, live it to the fullest. Like, I have to do stuff. For me, that helps my mind. Like, I used to work out because I thought I wanted to look physically like a certain way. And that's couldn't be further from the truth now, right? I don't even touch weights now because I don't care. Because I don't need that. That actually made me feel worse.
Right.
Because
you're always chasing something.
Yeah, because it wasn't real. That wasn't my reality. My reality, like, especially with me with basketball, like, that's actually the opposite of what you should be doing.
Yeah,
you got to
do more range of motion.
Right. So it's all relative. And my reality, I've made peace with is I love basketball and I love music and I love talking. So these are the things I'm doing. You know, that's literally what. And obviously my wife. So I feel like I've hit a lot of those, and I think that's where they say, because most people on average usually get married in their late 20s. Yeah. And they figured out their career. So we're starting to hit these things, right? Relationship, career, your finances now good. It should be decent. And then the spirituality and all of that, right? That's why I guess a lot of people say, what's the saying? Those like 30s are like that decade to enjoy the last 29 years that you like worked for. Right. Because then,
but usually that's never the case. Right? Everybody's just figuring out what the heck is going on.
That's true. Yeah. It's just a lot better for a lot of people in their 30s than it is.
You're out of school and all.
You're out of school. You've done a lot of the stuff that you grew up being told to do.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
So you've almost checked those off. So anyway, to bring us back to life after death, and I think my take on all of this is if you've made peace with that reality, that relationship, I think then death isn't really like, what is it, right? You welcome it, whatever it is. I feel, because you're at peace with this life, and I feel like we do get to a point, and I saw it with my father-in-law, but he went young, just like your father-in-law, like unexpected, right? And it was, but towards the end, he was just so at peace with everything, right? Obviously, in the beginning, he went through the fears of like, what, cancer, this, that. But when he made peace with it, when he saw that, like, I feel like he was just calm. Like, he was just calm, and he was really happy. And one of the things he said to me when he could still speak and he was still able to communicate, but he was sick, he told me, he was like, I lived my whole life thinking like, my way is right. But he said it then. He's like, but what if it wasn't? What if he's like, there's multiple ways to do things, right? And what I got from that is he was basically saying, like, he was letting go of his like what he was hanging on to, right?
Becoming more fluid.
Yeah, he was becoming more fluid, and he was already like, he wasn't like a strict person. He was just, but like in his mind, he was like, that was a realization for him.
Right.
And then by the end, like, he was just so he was like loving everybody, right? You know, he was like so happy that it was just pure joy, right? Until obviously he wasn't able to physically communicate it. But I know I believe he was happy until when his day came.
Yeah.
You mentioned something though about the something, right? And we can wrap up on this, but
Okay.
the actual thumbnail on your video is an eye.
Right.
So explain what you mean by this. You were talking about there's something within the eye that tells us something.
You mean the three parts that there's nothing, there's something. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I guess the conclusion of my video is there has to be something.
Yeah.
But I guess taking us through it is not necessarily the way that everyone talks about, which is just based on hope and faith and just guessing things. But looking at patterns of life and going across. And the truth of it is that, and these are based on my own experiences, there is absolutely no way that any of us can understand what comes next.
Yeah.
It's impossible. The reason being is if you get anybody, I'll give you $1 million. If you take anybody and you teach the mountains and the trees and the stars to a baby in the womb, it's impossible because your consciousness just has not developed to be capable.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you know, and you can't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
You can't. It's not even you don't know. You can't at that stage.
Yeah.
Likewise, in this stage, we cannot yet know or understand. And those people who have got any glimpses of it will always tell you that cannot be brought here. You can't. You cannot bring the concepts of a tree and a mountain into the life of the womb.
Yeah.
So even if you experience it, even if, let's say I'm seeing it here right now, I cannot bring it into language.
Yeah.
I can't bring it into words.
Yeah.
And that's just due to the infinite nature of what we really are. And again, that has to do a little bit with my own experiences of how every person, me, even though I'm sitting here, I'm existing in multiple different dimensions all at the same time. But my consciousness may be localized into this table and into this body and so forth, but I exist on many different planes. And societies in the past used to study this and they used to explore these other planes. They used to talk about it like we talk about food today. Yeah. But our society has become so materialistic because we're focused on instant gratification, buying and consuming and whatever is related to what's useful now. Forget about that. We even throw old people away. We don't like old people, right? Because they take us to a place in life where they make you think about, well, what if this stuff I care about is not really that important? They remind you.
That reality.
Right. And they always pull you there. And because they don't give you that instant gratification, they don't let you stay with your attachments. Yeah. We try to stay away from them. We call them weird or boring or whatever the case may be. But that's also the part of the beauty of it, the surprise of it. So what we can expect is patterns, I would say. It's useless and impossible to expect exactly what comes. Yeah. But what we can expect is patterns. Whatever you are will extend. For example, if you're in the womb, if you develop strong arms and legs, you come to this life, you can be a runner. You expand it into that role. If you develop a strength of will, so we have physical faculties, but we have spiritual faculties. It doesn't usually get talked about. One of them is your will. How many people tell you you need to strengthen your will? Yeah. Your ability to accomplish has to do with your will. You can have a weak will. Yeah. For example, I say tomorrow that I'm going to get up and go do this run, right? Or tomorrow I'm going to start this diet. Yeah. If I have a strong will, I can do it 100 days consecutively without a beat. Yeah. If I have a weak will, I'll give up literally by 8 p.m. Right. So developing your will, developing your imagination, that's another one. Like you have to imagine this table first happened in your mind. This idea, right? Phumblepodcast, the camera, everything. Everything, your guess, what type of guess you have, what type of ideas would be discussed. Yeah. All of these first happen in you and your power of imagination, which has nothing to do with your body. Right. It's one of the powers your soul holds. And another one is memory. Yeah. So we're developing these now. And the better you develop it, the more they will expand. And one thing I can tell you is, another thing you can expect, and this didn't really make it into my video, but we can really see this in dreams, is, you take somebody and a lot of times they play these pranks. Somebody's sleeping and you take a bucket of water and dip their hands in it and they pee themselves. Yeah. Your consciousness or your soul creates the outer expression of your sensation in a dream-like state, right? In this life, the same thing is happening, but there's a delay in time. Yeah. You are always creating reality but from the moment of creation to the moment of or seeing it, there is a time. Sometimes it happens in 6 months. Sometimes it happens in a year. For example, if you become a kind person, it takes about 5 to 6 months or a year or maybe a decade for you to attract kind people into your life. You understand?
Yeah.
If you're a successful person, successful circumstances may take time in order to be attractive.
Yeah.
This reality provides time and space before you arrive at things. And part of the reason I think it does is because you don't know what you want.
Right.
Imagine if everybody immediately attracted what they thought they'd be happy.
Yeah.
This world will be destroyed in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So there is a delay between what you think you want and your manifestation of it, so that by the time you arrive at it, you can reframe it, you can redesign it, you can recreate it. As you get closer and closer, as your soul expands, the delay between your creation and your experience of it shortens. So essentially what happens is what you think you are, that happens in your dreams right now.
Yeah.
If you feel scared, you will immediately create a scary scene in your image.
Yeah.
And that's part of the both empowering but the scary thing of the worlds to come. It's like a mirror. If you make an ugly face, the ugly face will come at you quicker. But if you make a beautiful face, it will come quicker. There's not space and time to prevent it. So that's why they say this world is the womb of reality, or this world is training wheels.
Yeah.
You're learning first, you create. Second, pay attention to what you create. Third, be really conscious of it, because soon enough, the time frame is going to be immediate.
Yeah.
With a thought, you'll create circumstances.
Yeah.
So, again, that doesn't really tell you what's going to happen,
Yeah.
but it teaches you based on pattern what is already happening in your dreams and in the world of womb, and you can expect it to happen more and more.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff is deep, man. I mean, it can get really, really profound. But I mean, I love it. This is stuff we don't talk about enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know?
It's not just us. Like, nobody talks about it, again, because you always diverted back into the same old.
Well, I think a lot of it came from fear, right? And then fear itself. You know, there's a video of like a baby in India, I think, and there's a cobra in his face, but he doesn't know what fear is. So he's just smacking it, right? He doesn't know what.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
Yeah.
The cobra doesn't do
anything.
Right?
It's crazy to me. Like, I'm like, and the parents obviously aren't around, but I bet if they were, they would be like, no, right?
Yeah.
Because they've been taught this. So this whole idea of like fear or will or patterns of thought, you know, it's like what we teach our kids or what we learn from the outside world, right, on our own. I always think like things are very complex in this world, but they're also very simple. Like, in a way, they're simple because if you ignore the noise that humans are making, right, and just focus on the energies that are coming. And I think the older I'm getting, the more in touch I'm learning to be with that, right? It's easier for me to ignore, like, what the new trend is, or to ignore, like, you know, when I was younger, I wanted the best shoes, I want all this. Like, and sometimes I do, but it's for me, right? Like, if I genuinely feel that energy, that positive energy, and it's not because someone else is wearing it, like, I like it if I'm, like, shopping. Like, I'll see it. Or if I see it online, I'll be like, there's a lot of things I see online that I don't even think twice about, right? And a lot of people are like that, but a lot of people aren't. A lot of people will look at every ad, you know? But that's how that instant gratification business model, that's how they're running social media. That's how they're running the news outlets. That's how they're running a lot of business models are running that way, even physical stores.
Right.
Anyway, so I think for me, and then we'll wrap this up. But I want you back on this, man. These are topics. These are some of the topics I've always wanted to discuss.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Yeah,
it's awesome to have a space to be able to share these ideas.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody's really doing it in this format.
I mean, and maybe they are, and good for them. I mean, I know actually another friend from college who just started a podcast, and it's about togetherness. And I was so funny because I messaged him. I'm like, bro, I don't. It made me happy, right? Like, I wasn't upset or afraid. Like, oh, he's gonna. But see, those could have been my initial. And anybody who's competitive, and I'm competitive, but I've learned to manage that. Like, there's certain things that you don't need to be. You actually want to team up with. And I told him I want him to be on here, you know, and I want him to tell me about it, what inspired him to be on here. So anyway, my point is this death and the unknown, right? I think we do a lot of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
It stems from me, I think people fear it, right? Initially. People fear it because it's unknown. We don't know what's on the other side.
Correct.
And that's what this whole thing is about. We've been talking about it. But I think the older I'm getting, and the older people get, because when I ask old people about death, 9 out of 10 of them, they're not sweating it. They're not. They're cool with it. Like they're like, yeah, it's gonna happen. We all die.
Yeah.
But like, maybe I'll say that at 80 if I make it that long. But it's like, but at 20 or 30, I was like, I'm still like, there's moments of like, oh. But I'm starting to look at those elderlies and see like, how are they living their life? How come they don't give a shit about the stuff that we care about? Right? They must have cared at one point.
Yeah.
Right? How did they go? Like, I'm so hungry to get to that level of thinking, and that's good and bad. You need to enjoy the present. You can't just be like, I want to be thinking like an 80-year-old, because then nobody wants to hang out with you.
Yeah.
But my point is that that fear, I think, is just having this talk. It's dissipated because you realize it's learned. Right? Like mental habits are learned, physical habits are learned.
Definitely. And it could go back to, again, that relationship you have with reality. What I've learned is, there's 4 dynamics to relationship. The first dynamic to relationship, and this is both with reality and also with your spouse or whoever.
Yeah.
The first one is competition.
Yeah.
And that was a great example. For example, you said that your friend is doing a very similar thing.
Yeah.
So you receive information that your friend is doing certain things.
Yeah.
Right? And you defined it a certain way. You could have defined it or have it meant a million different ways.
Yeah.
So
I could have been negative about it.
You could have been negative. You could have been competitive about it. Right?
Yeah.
I need to be better than them. But you went to the last stage, and I'll talk about what that is. So the first stage is competitiveness. This is the animal kingdom way of living. It's always about condition. Not enough. It's all about lack.
Yeah.
I need to get mine because it's not enough for everybody.
Yeah.
The second stage is you move into cooperation. So you start cooperating with things.
Yeah.
Now, you're still hesitant. You're not sure about things. But you cooperate because more good comes out of cooperation than competition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The next stage, you move into collaboration. Collaboration means you're pretty happy about what the result of cooperation is bringing. Right? Because you've tried cooperation for a while and you're seeing the results and you're not in the fear anymore. Because when you're in cooperation, you're still in fear. You're just cooperating because you fear competition.
Oh, yeah.
But you move in collaboration, you're not in fear anymore. You're doing it because of the joy of cooperation and collaboration.
Yeah.
And the last stage is co-creation. Co-creation is when you understand you're creating your own reality, but so is everybody else.
Yeah.
And when you have 2 people understanding they're both creating and they start co-creating, then you're on a whole new level, which means that you are no longer stepping in front of yourself. Everything that comes into your field of perception, you no longer see it as something that's stopping you, but something that's helping you get to wherever you need to get.
Yeah.
And this level of co-creation, this can be done with your spouse. So if both of you are understanding this, because there's relationships where and I've been in competition.
Yeah.
It's about power struggle.
Yeah.
It's about who's exited what or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're in relationships with co-creation as you talk with your spouse, hey, I'm going to do this, you support me. And then they start giving you ideas of how you could do it even better. Yeah. Because they're so aligned with you, co-creating it.
Yeah.
But what happens if you co-create with reality itself? Right? If you start co-creating with reality itself, meaning you're understanding reality is creating things, but you're also creating reality itself. So you develop this mutual relationship, a handshake of trust. And what happens if you sustain it over years and years and years? Fear dissipates, tends to. So you start trusting what reality does. If reality says death is part of what I do, say, okay. If it says life is part of what I do, say, okay. If it says challenges, losing your job, losing the spouse, having the worst week of your life is what I do, you say, okay, I trust you.
Yeah.
Because you're in a state of co-creation rather than competition with reality.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
That's crazy. And it reminded me of a basketball legend, Kobe Bryant. I think he was like amazing in that. Facing all fears. Like he didn't fear anything.
Yeah, I feel like he did that in his profession so well.
But everybody says he was so competitive.
Uh-huh.
I think it's more than that. I think he was collaborative and he was co-creating. Mm-hmm. He knew he got to that point, right?
Yeah.
But to the ignorant mind, myself included, when I'd see him like, damn, this dude is so competitive, he won't lose, right? but he was like 30 steps ahead of that,
Yeah.
right? And that's why, like, not saying it was easy, he had to work on it, but he didn't fear it, right? He was just, he welcomed change. And they always said, is like, he thought, he like brought into his reality just through his will. Like he willed it into his reality. Like he didn't
like
give
flow
up.
state, like they talk about it, right?
Right. Yeah. He didn't quit. Like he didn't, like if he was so in touch with his imagination and creative
and believe that he can bring it about.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Because if you just look at him physically, there was 1,000 players that are more physically gifted.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you wouldn't see that when he was playing, right?
Yeah.
Like he was able to do that because up here he knew.
And I think that's why, as a society, we love sports so much, because it's such a visual representation of your will. How your will leads to results, right?
Yeah.
We see it on a collective level, and we can visualize it. And I think that's why we give so much of our emotion to it, because we can see it in live action, that when you co-create, especially with your teammates, we all know this now, that if you're one person and that's all it is, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
But if you're aligned and co-create with your teammates and with, for example, they say that, I don't know if it's Phil Jackson or what was the coach of Miami Heat? The famous ones.
The famous one. Pat Riley.
Yeah, one of them. I don't know which one, but he would have his players meditate before the games, and how would they?
Phil Jackson.
They will visualize their win.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's going to a place of, again, co-creating with reality, right?
Yeah.
Because what is meditation?
Yeah.
Me turning my eye into reality and saying, "Hey, help me create this."
Right.
But what happens if you have multiple people do it?
Yeah.
Right. All on the same level.
That's right.
And then you have the results that Phil Jackson did. You know, I'm not that versed in like sports and stuff but when I heard that, I was like, that guy, he knows stuff about reality that most people don't, and he's using it in sports.
That's great. Yeah. It's great. And Kobe too. He coached Kobe.
Right.
Yeah, man. We can talk out for hours on these things, man. This is great. Awesome. And obviously, you're going to come back. I want you back on. And why don't you plug away your channel and your Instagram and everything?
Sure. So my, the channel's name is Expansionetwork. That's the same on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
With one N.
With one N. Yeah, that's right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So one N in the middle. And again, it's about those 5 concepts that I believe control everybody's life. And my content is all centered around these subjects, and I fluctuate between them. So thank you so much for having me. And again, it's awesome that you're doing this, and I had a lot of fun.
Good, man. Well, you're welcome back anytime. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We're going to have Hesam back on here soon, because he has a great mind, and I want to hear more about your awesome research.
Awesome, man.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
No, we got to shake the way you were showing.
No.
So now, I guess, turn your mic off.
Just put all that in there. You just hear a bunch of slaps in there. And you slap me out.
I'm only putting that.
Together we'll purify the mind and have a good time. I'll showcase your very best.